I would like to introduce the moderator. From CrowdWorks Incorporated, we have President and CEO and Director of the Japan Association of New Economy, Mr. Koichiro Yoshida. And the panelists are as follows. First of all, Project Associate Professor Yutaka Matsuo of the Graduate School of Engineering of the University of Tokyo. From Rakuten Incorporated, Executive Officer and Global Head of the Rakuten Institute of Technology Worldwide, Mr. Masaya Mori, who also serves as the Secretary of the Japan Institute of Information Technology. And we have Representative Director, CEO, and CTO of ABEJA Incorporated, Mr. Yousuke Okada. And we'd now like to ask Mr. Yoshida to take over. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are now starting the AI session. Every year, there is much attention focused on this AI session. This year, we're shifting from the conceptual to the practical matters. There are many case studies available here in Japan. In that sense, we would like to look at the efforts made not just throughout the world in regard to AI, but the latest trends in technology in Japan, and as well as future Japanese strategies using AI and how to differentiate from the rest of the world. We would like to ask each speaker to introduce themselves for a minute or two, and we'll change the screen and ask Professor Matsuo to start. My name is Matsuo of the University of Tokyo. I've been doing research on AI, especially deep learning, and I have spoken about this matter. And I believe that there are strategies possible using the characteristics of Japanese AI. Thank you very much. Now we'd like to call upon Mr. Mori. My name is Mori of Rakuten Incorporated, and I'm mainly in charge of overseeing R&D matters at Rakuten. And I'm carrying out the management of Rakuten Institute of Technology Worldwide. And in 4 countries in the world, we have in Tokyo and Singapore and Paris AI engineers, as well as in Boston. And in regard to what kind of activities are being carried out, for example, we do the usage of drones in robotics, and also how this can make a contribution to the delivery business of Rakuten. And we're taking advantage of deep learning. Last week at Silicon Valley, we've built a new office of the Rakuten Institute of Technology in Silicon Valley, and we are looking at telegeneration of contents, referred to as creative AI, and we're trying to promote this project. It's near the highway. It's in a place that stands out very much. Yes, that's right. That is where our new base is, in Silicon Valley. Next, Mr. Okada. How do you do? My name is Okada of ABEJA Incorporated, and I'd like to express my gratitude for this opportunity. Now, I may look old, but I'm actually just 29 years old. And 6 years ago, in September of 2012, we decided to focus on AI in this company, ABEJA. And we have a very good partnership with Mr. Mark Benioff's company, Salesforce, and he'll be appearing later on. And we were the first company that Salesforce.com invested in here in Japan. And we had some unique activities carried out, and we are anxious to be globally active. Last week, we have established a joint venture operation with CyberAgent, and we're moving forward with deep learning in the field of advertising. So we hope that the applications in this area will increase more and more through these kind of activities. Thank you. ABEJA is said to be the next big IPO, and we're pleased to have Mr. Okada present here. This is the way we have divided the world, but there's been discussion about the fact that we should not place China and Singapore together, that China is far more ahead than what this chart indicates. At any rate, we would like to look at, first of all, the various efforts throughout the world in regard to AI, and then we'd like to look at the technical approaches in AI and what kind of technical approaches are being made here in Japan in regard to AI, and then based on those technical approaches, what are the strategies that are about to be implemented. And first of all, I was astonished to learn upon doing some investigation that when we look at the Japanese AI market, according to IDC Japan, in 2021, it is said that it would be about 250 billion yen or so. But then Alibaba has already invested more than 1 trillion yen, and Amazon R&D investment, mostly in AI, is 2.5 trillion yen. So it's 10 times the scale of the Japanese market that a single company is already making investments in the United States. So we'd like to first start off with the subject of America, and we will not refer to Professor Matsuo with honorifics anymore, but we'll simply refer to him as Matsuo-san. Google and Facebook are known. There's the research for AI that Google Brain has carried out, and there's also the Facebook AI research that is being carried out, and both have several hundred outstanding researchers involved. As already mentioned, they have abundant R&D budgets that they are spending. And so they are doing things with a great deal of abundance. And they're developing a lot of sophisticated technologies already. In Silicon Valley, of course, there are a lot of startup companies, and they're using deep learning in many cases. For medical images, there are startups. There are startup companies in facial recognition. For all conceivable areas, there are startup companies active. From around 2015, there's an increase in the number of startups in the field of AI, and many have been acquired. There's tremendous momentum, and this continues. Matsuo-san, what are the American startup companies or large companies' technologies that you're focusing your attention on? Well, the level is so high. So there aren't too many that I'm focusing my attention on. What? Let's bring some hope to Japan. Well, really, right now in deep learning, major papers have been written. And if we look at Google and Facebook and DeepMind, we see a lot of papers. And DeepMind was acquired by Google in the beginning of 2014. Recently, Uber and Apple have also started to emphasize efforts in this area. So how should I say it? There's already an ecosystem in place. Let's say that there's an outstanding PhD that's just graduated. Then they're already able to earn 50 to 60 million yen per year immediately upon graduation from university. Why, that's much higher than my income. And then several hundreds of million if they're veterans, and some who are making billions of yen if they're heads of research institutes. It's almost like professional baseball, yes. And so they're in a very blissful situation, and they're working without any dissatisfaction at all.
So even with that amount of money, people who want to make more money, they would actually start up their own company. But once you're receiving that much amount of money, it becomes somewhat subtle whether you would like to take that chance or not. Because you're not worried about money anymore if you're paid that much. And of course, the environment is great. And also you have enough funds to do R&D and you have great colleagues. So why would you want to start up? So of course, you would see some people such as that in the industry. So a lot of venture capital continue to pump in funds. I'm starting to feel hopeless. Could you give us more idea about the U.S. situation then? So, and of course, we'd like to cover China and Singapore later by Mr. Mori. So since the era of internet, the scalability has dramatically changed. So let's just say back home, if there's one researcher, and they're undergoing, let's just say, a project on semi-supervised learning. Let's just say you're doing this research. So we call it GMV in Rakuten, which is gross merchandise value. So it actually pushed up the GMV by several tens of billions of yen because of this particular research conducted by a researcher. So this is nothing exceptional. This is quite common in the internet era, in this industry. So we talked about 40 to 50 million. That is not an issue for the researcher. So if you're actually recruiting several tens of researchers, you can still recoup that investment. And of course, in the era of internet, you could continue to do so. And of course, in the time of startup, you may be able to change the market completely. So in terms of ROI, there is definitely economic feasibility to all these investments that we've been talking about. So we do have base in Boston and Silicon Valley, as we talked about in the Research Institute. So in the recruiting process, it continues to be difficult for us, because it is really difficult to offer a competitive offer to these prospect engineers. So we talked about China and Singapore. And Professor Matsuo mentioned that it's quite China and Singapore, the things are dramatically changing more. And their society is close, yet the data is transacted differently. So, for instance, in Japan, there's restriction relative to the use of drones. So you cannot fly drones over people. And however, in China and Singapore, there are no regulations as such. And that's why they can do much more aggressive research in the drone field. And of course, the investment amount is quite large. For instance, Alibaba on a standalone basis, they're investing 1 trillion or so. So China is actually next to U.S. in terms of the number of papers been issued on AI. So Japan cannot compete with China as of this moment. Now, Alibaba, last year, on the 11th of November, they used AI to automatically generate the advertisement. So they have actually announced this move last November. And automatically, they were able to generate 400 million of individualized banners. This is automatically generating. So that's 400 million of advertisement they've been able to generate on a customized basis, personalized basis. So it's quite amazing what they're able to do. And they have the payment solution that is backed by AI. And actually, this move, we are seeing that transferred to Singapore. Some of the services that were originated in China, now it's been deployed in Singapore. So there's definitely traction there. So for Rakuten Institute, we do have a base in Singapore as well. And I was there last year, and actually I was there 2 weeks ago. There was definitely changes in Singapore. Because wherever we go, I witness the shared bicycles, which was not in existence last year. And I asked my staff, how come there's been such move this year? Because all of a sudden, 4 companies have made an entry into Singapore. So that is one dramatic move that we have seen in Singapore from last year to this year. So Singapore has that kind of market to accept those new ideas, new startup companies. And so that is the feel I have towards China and Singapore. So judging from what we've heard, we are seeing the individual companies investing and researching in the U.S., whereas in China and Singapore, they seem to be more in collaboration with the government, and despite all the regulations and so forth. So for Rakuten, your main base is Singapore. So for the Rakuten Institute, the research institute, we do have our base in Singapore. So there's a national research institute in Singapore. And we were able to gather some of the most talented engineers from there. So in the machine translation field, that is one of our main solutions we're provided in Singapore, and we are able to gather that expertise from Singapore. So there's definitely talent in existence in Singapore, and therefore it is easier for us to conduct activities. What are the reasons that we have those talent in Singapore, not in Japan? If you can share those with us. So, of course, there's Chinese descent and also Indian descent people in Singapore, but a lot of people do come from Australia as well. So Singapore, in terms of its location, it is known to provide a very favorable compensation to these talent. So it's been developed that way. So it's more aggressive than Japan. Or how could I put it? So let's just say the National Research Institute in Singapore, you're not evaluated based on the number of papers or number of patents. It's more that you're based on how much collaboration that you've done with the private sector, with companies. So the engineers of a National Research Institute, they're evaluated based on what kind of business that they're able to deliver. So it's quite tough. So that is perhaps the reason why they've been able to do more practical experiments and tests. So what about the case in Germany? Okada-san. So it seems as if Japan is losing out against Germany. So Japan is in a fairly dangerous position then. So, of course, Siemens and SAP and Bosch, these are large corporates in Germany. But they are launching their strategy with the understanding of IoT. So let's just say you're collecting data through IoT. You also need to understand what is the kind of API you're going to use. So those are definitely the mindset within the large corporates in Germany. But maybe for the Japanese large corporates, not many of them understand the importance of API that is linked to IoT. So sometimes I'm convened to the management meeting as observer for large corporates, but quite often they don't understand what API is, and therefore they cannot do an in-depth discussion on IoT because they do not have the expertise in these fields. And quite often, the director in charge of IT would become the target of all the discussion, of all the opposition. And therefore, quite often, these Japanese large corporates are not able to make a fair decision on these IoT matter. So Siemens, they have MindSphere, which is an IoT infrastructure, and they have the AI strategy. And of course, Siemens, they have Leonard, SAP, and so they do have all these infrastructure. So deep learning needs to have all the collect all the data, and they need to really evaluate, analyze, and deliver the results. It's quite simple in terms of the function of AI in deep learning. And perhaps U.S. and China are ahead of the pack in terms of their research. And I think Germany and Singapore will become the second group, but Japan is falling behind. So it's quite self-explanatory, but these tasks are not executed in Japan. So I think there's still hope that Japan could engage in this if they understand the importance of this. So in Germany, for the IoT infrastructure, if you can share with us some of the practical examples. Are there any products or particular industry that they make use of this? So Siemens delivers a very clear example. So the data of the equipment within the factories, I think it is difficult to manage all these data on an integrated basis. And that's why they have this MindSphere as an infrastructure. So the partner companies would develop these programs. So they are delivering a platform strategy.
And it's possible to take advantage of AI there. And they can put it in a more model application. So they're able to do a lot of simple things. And they're able to do business in that manner and to build up their business model accordingly. Okada-san, you've talked about the fact that AI is relatively simple. It's a matter of how you collect data and how you process that data. Specifically here in Japan, in the field of AI, we'd like to look at what technical efforts are being made. There's semi-supervised learning or transferred learning. And people who know are already familiar with these, but perhaps we should explain about each of these three technologies. First of all, for GAN. Mori-san? Oh, GAN. Recently, there's much attention focused on generative adversarial network. And if you have a session in a workshop or an international conference, then there's a lot of people who gather there, and all the other sessions are empty of participants. Deep learning became popular as a buzzword around 2012. And Professor Hilton had done much research in image recognition or in Merck data competition. There was anticipation using deep learning that was presented, and deep learning was proven to be much more advantageous compared to other technologies, so it was considered a breakthrough technology. And in most technical areas, there's utilization of deep learning. And GAN, G-A-N, is AI to create data. It stands for Generative Adversarial Network. So it's like research on AI to deceive AI, from which this started from. AI needs data to learn, especially in the case of deep learning. Even more than conventional methodologies, you need a lot of data. You need a million pieces of data or even 10 million pieces of data in order to be able to apply this to image recognition or machine learning or voice recognition. So, but if it comes to that, among some corporations, they don't have a million or 10 million sets of data. They only have about 1,000 sets of data. But it's not possible to use just 1,000 sets of data to create image recognition. But GAN started from AI to deceive their AI. So they treat seed data as if it were genuine data. So they're able to be clever about the data that they provide. Deep learning takes advantage of this kind of data as if it were real data. And it's possible to do deep learning efforts in the assembly lines or so on. It was quite revolutionary. So with very limited data sets, it's possible to do deep learning activities in graphics and games. They've started to apply this GAN technology. And in manufacturing lines, there's a gradual effort to incorporate AI. And this is changing the game rules of deep learning completely. How about at Rakuten? Do you have any case studies that you can reveal to us here? We focused on the fact that this can generate data. So using generative adversarial network technology, you may compress an image and make it low-res image, but then you may want to revert that to high-definition images. But using that data, it'll be possible to use GAN to create high-resolution images. So you may have some old photograph that you took. You could use GAN to make it higher resolution image. That's a typical usage case. Another case is using this to generate product information. For example, right now, if you use a PC or a smartphone, then you may search for products, but there are also search for products using AI speakers that's increasing. It may be a PC or a smartphone or AI speaker, and there's a lot of product information that is different depending on which device you use to search for the product, and there's also difference in users' tastes. But there could be product information that's automatically generated that's suited for the individual, and there are efforts now to use GAN for that purpose. Well, on behalf of the audience, I would like to ask some questions about where this can be applicable. Who are the persons who could take advantage of this technology? Right now, there's a lot of research in deep learning, but also in image area. So if you look at image-centric areas, it may be easy to apply this technology. Let's say, for example, in a factory, you have an assembly line, and the worker may do work to eliminate defects from the line. But you may want to automate that with robots by taking advantage of image recognition, but you may not have sufficient data. You only may have several thousands of data sets, in which case you couldn't use deep learning. But then you could use GAN to generate data and have deep learning applied so that the robots would be able to remove the defective goods automatically and would be able to detect them as well. Well, Okada-san, listening to this, in regard to Okada-san's explanation, could you talk about these three technologies and what ABEJA is doing with these three technologies? First of all, if it comes to GAN, on our side, there's the inspection of the latest products in the manufacturing industry, and often this is dependent on manual labor. But to distinguish what's normal and abnormal, perhaps image could be generated. You could use GAN to generate the images, and it's quite difficult to generate that kind of data, but you could use GAN. And in semi-supervised learning, specifically in the area of machine learning, there's the supervised and unsupervised learning. But there are cases where in supervised data, you need to have some supervisory data applied. But if it's with a million data sets, then many customers wouldn't have such data sets available. So if it's just 500,000 or 10,000, that would have these kind of data sets, then this would be what is referred to as semi-supervised learning. But if there's too much data that's unsupervised, then it can be complemented. You've talked about this. Is that the rating of images? Yes, like scratches or so on. Or to distinguish between a dog and a cat. And if you need to have 1 million data sets, it's quite difficult to come up with that. But if you wanted to work with a limited amount of data, then you may apply this technology. As for transfer learning, in a certain field, there may be some data. There may be component A that you have a lot of data, and you may apply that to component B. So basically, a model created for component A would be applied in component B and component C as well. And you could do supervised learning through that way. This is specific to the manufacturing industry that I've been talking about, but it's applicable to other industries as well. Perhaps if you try to imagine what's possible, then more and more possibilities will emerge.
So I think semi-supervised learning, it's quite interesting. So Professor Matsuo, could you conclude on that? So Rakuten Ichiba, so they have 250 million products and that has been sold within the marketplace. So 45,000 markets are generating the product information. So these product information, the way it's been generated, it's not uniform because it's conducted by different outlets or different stores. So by making use of semi-supervised learning, we can have a much more seamless catalog. And this project has started back in 2012. So let me explain. There are 250 million products. So some products we don't know how to handle. So let's just say for wine, I think it's easy to understand how we generate the data for wine. For instance, where it's been produced, what's the color, what's the aroma, and also the volume. So all these could be put in as data. So for instance, if the produce area is not mentioned, then you can actually read in the image and then fill in that blank. Is that right? Yes, that is right. So sometimes the store manager, they may actually write the product description as a novel almost. So they may give the whole story, how they've been rejected by different companies and so forth. And so we try to make that description in a much more uniform basis. One other example is Buddhist altar. So actually, you can purchase the Buddhist altar online as well. So you can pay 77 million, and it's a massive amount of money. And with the 10 times points bonus, you can earn so many points through it. Another example would be a body armor from the warring period, for instance. Actually, this is hugely popular. You can't buy them online anymore. It's stock out. And the real armor could cost between 2 to 3 million. And actually, you have to wait 6 months until you can receive it. That's how popular it is. So I don't know what exactly they're going to do with the body armors. But you probably wouldn't understand how you would actually produce these body armors. So it's easier to understand if you were to study the example of wine. So if you can learn from the experience of wine, then you can apply that to a body armor or let's just say the Buddhist altar. So that is the semi-supervised learning in essence. And this way we can identify if the outlets or the stores have mistaken information uploaded. So for instance, certain liquor may not be categorized as sake, but they may have to categorize as part of shochu spirit. So back in 2012, we actually conducted this initiative. And in some cases, according to some of the merchants, they were able to increase the sales by 20% or so because after all these initiatives. So that is why it's so impactful to really treat and make the information accurate. So once you have the accurate data, it is easy to research, and also you can have a much better recommendation to the potential buyers. So that is a definite example leading to business. So back then, Tengumai was identified as muffler, as scarf. So Tengumai is an alcohol. It's a drink. But for some reason, it was categorized as part of a scarf. So that was quite wrong. But by adjusting that data, they were able to boost the sales. So semi-supervised learning could be applied elsewhere. So in my company, we deal with people, about the crowdsourcing of people and matching them. So we have been conducting that through so if you can actually conduct those matching and fill those information on automated basis, that is quite exciting. So if you can make use of this technology in your own industry in your own business, I think this could be quite exciting. So who should I approach to? Should I talk to Mr. Mori, or should I talk to some other gentleman? So Mr. Matsuo will now share with us some of the latest review on the technology. So if you can share with us the 3 points. So in terms of semi-supervised learning and transfer learning, they're quite similar in terms of the concept. So supervised learning and unsupervised learning, actually, it's quite similar as well. Because whether it's supervised or unsupervised, it is really identifying the structure that resides within the data. So once you're able to identify that structure, even with limited the data, you can actually conduct the learning. So it's quite similar in terms of the concept. So human brain is actually doing unsupervised learning. So it's hard to really teach someone if it's a cat or a dog. So the reason you can learn before you're given the data is because you have a learning process beforehand, and you are reducing the number of hypotheses beforehand. And therefore, in the human brain, there's definitely unsupervised learning underway. Now, for GAN, the generative adversarial network, this is a generative model, as we talked about. So machine learning, it has different models, for instance, identification and so forth. So they can identify the data. So GAN and VAE, and also we have the combination of RNN as well. VAE, RNN, could you explain about these concepts? They're similar technology. So variational automated encoder, that's VAE. So the data is actually comparison to smaller set, and you can actually reproduce the original data. So if you can actually repeat this learning process, even the data may be lacking in one part, you can actually reproduce the original data. So that's what VAE is. So there are various technology out there. So the data is very important. And in the human brain, imagination is very important. Let's just say here, if you can imagine what happens if I were to drop a glass. So this is a generative model. So using this generative model, we can predict the near future event, and we can act according to that prediction. So generative model is very important for the human brain, and there are many applications out there. And so I think this is definitely a very important technology for AI. So listening to that explanation, it seems as if the human brain is doing all these on an unconscious basis. But now we are trying to discover what is happening on a logical basis. So I've been involved in the work-style reform initiatives. So according to NRI, the human activities, half of that could be replaced by AI. But hearing what you have to say, it seems AI could replace entirely the work of a human. Would you say so? Actually, this could lead to a fairly deep discussion, but let's just start off by saying humans. In majority of the case, just like other animals, we're mammals. So we're same as dogs or monkeys, for instance. So we identify objects, and we act, and we try. So for the recognition and actions, we're actually very similar to other animals. But where we differ the most is the fact that we use words. We are able to talk. So in terms of the image processing, that is exactly where we differ from others. So we can actually imagine what is not in front of you. And also you can convey the information to other humans. So this is the hypothesis I have. This is the kind of stream we have in the brain. So what is possible in deep learning? It's more in terms of the recognition and processing. So cognitive behavior. So to realize this intelligence has not been done yet. But in the very near future, we should be able to make this kind of intelligence. So based on that assumption that all these could be replaced, we need to develop new business and also create new companies then based on all these understanding. So let's move on to the next topic. How can we utilize on technology that we excel in? So that could be a manga or animation, a retail, and manufacturing. So how can Japan compete with U.S. or let's just say the government-led initiatives in China and Singapore, or the initiatives we see in Germany? How could Japan compete? How can Japan could be the only one entity? If you can give us your view on this issue. So, Mr. Okada, please. So, from our perspective,
in areas Japan excels in, there are quite a few partnerships emerging. And to win in the competition, you have to look at how much AI investment budgets you're able to realize. You may talk about 100 million yen, but it's 2 orders of magnitude difference with others. If you look at Amazon R&D, annual budget is 2.5 trillion yen. Alibaba is over 1 trillion yen, and you can't win in the competition if you only have a budget of 100 million yen. So it's at least 2 orders of magnitude difference, or it could even be 3 orders of magnitude difference in the amount of investment. So we have to think about that. Also, in the case of Japan, the ecosystem is not in place yet. There are some activities there, but within an ecosystem, deep learning startup companies are usually started by 3 or 4 persons who just graduated university, and they, frankly speaking, have no products. They have some engineering skills. If there is solid financing of such operations so that the ecosystem can be cultivated, then I believe that this could provide some promising aspects for Japan. So our hope is that an ecosystem will be built and that it will grow. And so I'm working with Matsuo-san in the Japan Deep Learning Association to cultivate such an ecosystem. And so we hope that many people will support our efforts here. In the case of Siemens or Bosch, they're old traditional companies. And so their starting point is the same as Japanese manufacturing companies. But in terms of reinvesting their profits, they're able to invest in new areas. But for reinvesting profits into areas like AI, it sounds like management consulting, but how should Japanese corporations go about it? Well, I'm wondering why such allocation cannot be done in Japanese companies. Now, Dr. Hinton's paper came about in the year 2012, and it was in October of 2012 in a Deep Learning International Congress. He talked about the revolutionary technology that improved the error rate by 10%. It was related to deep learning. Yes, Professor Hilton's team were not experts in that field, but they looked at the precision of the algorithms of the professionals in a particular field and were able to reduce the error rate by 10%. And under those circumstances, this was openly available as of October 2012, but then people were not taking any action, and I was wondering why. It was a puzzle to me. And we established our company in September of that year, and the paper was published in October. So I'm wondering why people did not take note. People should have studied that paper. They should have studied it and understand the potential of deep learning and change the allocation of their budgets. I think that that's a very reasonable way to go about things. I'm sorry to have been unfamiliar with that paper. You don't have to read it yourself. You could have some people who are knowledgeable read it, but you could feel how fantastic it is. Well, it's a historical turning point then. But the management people are looking at how to increase sales or reduce expenses. But if you look at the 10% or 20% improvement, the answer is right in front of your eyes. Well, using Dr. Hilton's paper as the basis, we looked at this in terms of image recognition. And in Rakuten services, this is being applied. So image recognition of products is carried out, and there's high accuracy in our technology, but it's a C2C application. And in pre-processing of data, the more pre-processing you do, the accuracy goes down. Originally, the idea was that you should try to clean the data as much as possible and then process it. It depends, of course, on the business area that you apply it on, but in the theme that we pursued, the more we pre-process, the accuracy went down. The raw data should be going through the deep learning process. At any rate, it was not a matter of accuracy, but a matter of changing the business process itself completely. The impact was tremendous when we tried this, and so we looked at research into changing business process. So starting in 2012, you made a lot of changes. Yes, we looked at the business process and looked at what kind of efforts could be made to change the business process itself. Oh, Matsuo-san, how do you feel? With that turning point in 2012, what about the changes in the approaches? Well, as Okada-san says, people are not studying enough about this matter. Well, please forgive me for that. It's like the penetration of automobiles. And the dialogue was simply about using cars instead of coaches or buggies. But then people talk about what happens if people are killed by cars in accidents, leading to the elimination of humanity. But then what they should have been looking at was how to build an industrial nation based on automobiles and what kind of problems could occur. These are things that everybody should be aware of, and engineers have to be more deeply aware of as well, and management people have to be more deeply aware of the issues. But it's like that right now in regard to AI. Well, I'm a person in management, so instead of looking back at the past, perhaps we could make today as the turning point, upon which, what should we do? First of all, take a Coursera course in English of deep learning. That's the easiest way to understand this subject. Is it about 2 hours long? Or about 10 hours long? 10 some hours long Coursera course, and you'll be able to learn a great deal. Well, I should be able to improve my management skills tremendously then. It is a fact that in Rakuten, in the Institute of Technology, 80% of the people in Tokyo are non-Japanese. And Coursera's machine learning is something that everybody goes through at first. So that's a good start. But people who are not so good in English should look at our Deep Learning Association, because there's a course that we have in June. Well, perhaps I should take a look. I'll study for that, although there's just a little over a month. And how could management people link that to their business efforts? What are the kind of things that they should be doing? Okada-san will say something radical, but let me say something mild first before he says something very radical. In manufacturing industry, there are high-quality manufacturing lines, and you have a lot of craftsmen in the past who have built up a process of quality. But in converting that to AI, efforts are not being made, and the quality of AI is low at first. So if you want to have world-class quality, then you don't want to deteriorate that to AI levels. So there's the quality process that should be converted to AI. If you have engineers that can convert, there may be possibilities. But it's not so easy to do. Let's say that a craftsman is able to immediately detect a defective product. It's quite difficult to convert that to deep learning because humans can discover defects quite easily. Because it's very important as a survival instinct. You use your vision. And if something in the peripheral areas move around, then humans react very quickly because they understand that something dangerous has occurred.
So therefore, in terms of detecting the defects, humans excel in that. But deep learning, it's not the case. Actually, it's much better for them to learn good products rather than defect products. Therefore, it's a completely different perspective here. So we need to understand and collect data as to how the craftsman is using this and how can we convert that vis-a-vis deep learning. We need to do that in order to enhance the accuracy. So if we can actually develop engineers who can conduct that conversion, then Japan's still got a chance. So we can still enhance the level of AI and deep learning. So 20th century quality, that is the Japan perfect quality, I think it was supported by the craftsmen. But if we can convert that into deep learning or AI, then we do have a chance then. Thank you for that input. So let's just say I've gone through all the deep learning course. How can I make use of this in the actual business? How can I bridge the gap? If you can share with us your thought, Okada-san. So deep learning, it can be seen as a technology and it can be seen as a managerial concept. So from the management perspective, Japanese companies are really focusing on selling good products at low price. I think this is the mindset of Japanese companies. But actually, that mindset is gone. It's obsolete because we can no longer sell goods. We can only sell events and experience going forward. So I think more and more it becomes more important to sell the experience. So we need to imagine how can we apply the concept of deep learning in this. So based on that learning, so we need to continue to imagine and explore what could be the possibility. So we are starting to see more AI ventures in Japan, but we can team with them. The companies can team with them to launch new business. So try to pull in more funds, teaming up with these venture companies. That could be another option as well. So in terms of research and development, I think it is important to identify that there has been a competition to recruit the talent. And Japan could engage in that competition, but also they could engage in developing the human resource as well. So that way we can accommodate the real business as well. So my thought on that is, so now there's a cram exam for elementary school. Some of the important subjects, they call it the guided behaviors. So let's just say if the students are able to act or move according to the guideline of the teacher. That was one of the subjects that these kids were tested on for elementary school. But I think that was more of an obsolete model. So I think all these activities, the old activities, could be replaced by machines. But these linear activities could be replaced by machines. But non-linear activities, these are the area that human beings could engage in. So this is a direction we need to take going forward, and we need to nurture the skill to accommodate these non-linear activities. So I think the discussion is becoming quite heated, but we only have 7 minutes left here. But at this point, I'd like to open the floor for questions for these three panelists. So do we have the microphone ready? Yes, thank you for raising your hand here. So we'd like to begin the Q&A session in the remainder of the time. Thank you very much for the presentation. So in the next conference, blockchain is a buzzword. And I knew it was going to come up in this conference. So are you already involved in the blockchain technology? If not, what is your positioning of this concept? Thank you very much for that interesting question. Who would like to start off? So Mori-san, please. As far as Rakuten is concerned, as a group, so we have Rakuten Blockchain Lab. So that is the principal entity to leverage on blockchain technology. So various initiatives are underway. So we do have a number of press releases on certain projects already. So it is not just for cryptocurrency, but also it could be used for KYC. So has been implemented in various projects. Now, for blockchain AI, these themes would definitely become much more, gathering more interest going forward. But I think there's been a lot of just imagination only, just the conceptual part, illusion only as of this moment. So deep learning is a disruptive technology in AI, but how are we going to combine that with blockchain? It still needs to be explored. We have not been able to come up with a realistic solution. But let's just say for cryptocurrency, making use of blockchain, we can actually predict the most appropriate money supply, or also you can detect fraud. So we can make use of deep learning in this field. So cryptocurrency and AI application, there's definitely high affinity there. So Rakuten Group, we are making preparations to deal with this. So Okada-san, please. So AI times blockchain. So our stance is very similar to Rakuten. So we still haven't seen all the details and concrete matter. But in terms of initiatives, we do have the basic research underway to make the preparation. Now, the discussion we're seeing in Japan, it seems as if people are engaged in AI because you feel that you would be punished for not doing AI. And I think we are seeing a similar behavior in blockchain as well. We are just engaged in blockchain because it seems as if we're forced to do so. And so I think that may not be the attitude we need to take for technology. So we need to make sure we have a balanced decision-making vis-a-vis these technology. Any other questions from the floor? Thank you. So I'm involved in the operating schools, academic institutions. And as a principal and as a president, I represent the school. So that is my background. So I was wondering whether I should attend the other session or not, but I decided to be here. Thank you for joining us today. So it's the first time meeting Professor Matsuo. But I have met the other panelists in the other room. So I knew I can anticipate what they're going to speak about. But I'm glad I came here and after attending this session. So I think there was a point raised beforehand. It's about how we develop talent, develop people. That is important. But of course, people are going to die one day. So it may be meaningless trying to train someone, but maybe there's more importance to leverage AI with children at younger age, let's just say junior high school or high school. But I have not been able to find a model to enable that sort of a match of children, students with AI. So if you can give us an idea as to maybe there are some companies out there or products out there that would enable this to happen. So I think it's easy to understand the limit as to what AI can do. And also, that would enable us to understand what is the limit as to what human beings can do. So there's an AlphaGo. And AlphaGo has been upgraded to AlphaZero, which is, so they have all the game plans of all the ideas that even humans cannot understand. So they have really exceeded the level of humans already. So let's just say you have AlphaGo or AlphaZero. So they can beat any humans. But you cannot actually make a game more interesting than Go, because these computers or AIs, they cannot understand what is the fun part of Go. So creating this sort of a new world vision, new sort of ideas of the world. That is exactly the task of humans. So let's just say within a certain business scheme, AI can pursue how they can actually drive the sales. But in terms of what kind of business are going to pursue going forward, AI may not be able to do so. So to consider, these are kind of the services we can do, and these are the businesses that we can launch with our colleagues. That is the kind of approach only humans can do. So starting a new company, starting a venture, this is exactly the capacity and capability of human beings that we can enhance vis-a-vis AI. So these are the activities done by kindergarten students or elementary school kids. So this is not on guided basis. But just playing with that behavior, we can develop new business. So this is not rule-based. This is more of a creative process.
Well, we've run out of time. So we've had 2 questions. We'd like to get a comment from Matsuo-san, and then I would like to close off. In today's world, with AI and deep learning, major changes are about to happen. So I hope that the audience here will try to become more familiar with AI and deep learning. And especially for the young people, I hope that programming efforts will be pursued. This is a world that can be pursued by people in junior high school or high school, so we hope that people will learn the technology to generate new innovation. Thank you very much. As for today's summary, I mentioned about the difference in the amounts of investments made by Amazon and in the national budget of Japan. And Okada-san has mentioned that even if you have a lack of data, with current technology, it's possible to compensate for the lack of data and apply AI. This could be done in the manufacturing industry, and I'm going to try and read Professor Hilton's paper of 2012, and I'd like to learn from the course on deep learning. And as Okada-san has mentioned, I want to look at this with a sense of excitement, to look at what will be possible. That's what only humans can do. And we hope that we can establish Japan as an AI super country. Thank you very much for your participation. Yoshida-sama, Matsuo-sama, Mori-sama. We would like to thank Yoshida-san, Matsuo-san, Mori-san, and Okada-san. Let's offer them another round of applause. Thank you.